Ladies and gentlemen, what side opposition has been telling us is that basically when a parent is in prison, they lose their right to take care of their children, and that it is going to be bad for the child's development if this policy were to be passed through. Well, we on side proposition have stressed that the state does not have the right to take away an individual's interactive rights and the rights of other people because of individual criminality. And we're going to be clashing with them on this idea that this right, although while it is not absolute, in the case when it does actually interact with the rights of other people, like children, that is actually not acceptable for the government to take away the individual's rights. And we're going to be clashing more on them with this idea of what is better for the child. And in my speech, I'm also going to be taking a look at how the purpose of justice is not just about retribution and punishment, but it is also about the rehabilitation of citizens back into society and as individuals, as a person. But before I move on to that, let's take a look at some of the things that side opposition has brought to the table. Because basically they've told us that the parent's right is not absolute, and thank you, sir, and secondly, that it's going to be bad for the children. So let's deal with this first theme about the parents not having the absolute right. They told us that parents don't have absolute rights. When they commit a crime, basically that right is going to be taken away. On certain levels, we agree that parents don't have the absolute right. That's why we defined out pedophilia and parents who actually abuse their children. Because in these cases, as we've shown to you, it proves that the parents have shown that they're not capable and don't have that inherent responsibility to their child. What they fail to clash with us on this idea is that what we've been trying to argue with is that when you've committed a crime, that criminality doesn't exactly negate the fact that you have the ability to take care of your children. So we say that on this idea of parents not having the absolute right, they haven't actually taken a very good look at the nature of these interactive rights, at the nature of the state being able to, only to a certain extent, to be able to take away an individual's rights when that individual has committed a crime against the state, but when that individual also has the role as a parent, that role, those rights that the parent has cannot be taken away by the state, similar to the example we gave you about husbands and wives being able to still retain their rights as their role in their husband and wife, but because the state doesn't have the right to take away those rights of their other roles. But then, let's take a look at their second point about what's better for the child. They told us that we don't want children to be raised by kidnappers and murderers. We have two responses to this. Firstly, I think that that's a rather extreme characterization of this motion. If they're going to be basing their entire case only on kidnappers and murderers, a very small minority of cases, we think that that's not actually clashing with us at all, because we think that the large majority of people who actually fall under this motion are people who've been sentenced to say 5 to 10 years, a crucial amount of the crucial time period in which the development of the child is able to actually form, a crucial amount of time where the bond between the parent and the child is actually forming. But we also, on this idea of extremes, we think that they've actually created a tension with their own case. They mentioned things like parents still being able to go out on parole boards and things like that. We think that if these criminals are able to be subject to things like parole boards, then they are not extreme cases. People like rapists, people like murderers aren't subject to that kind of rules. So they've actually conceded with us that they're actually talking about the larger majority of cases in which these parents aren't as extreme as being rapists and murderers. But even if we take a look at these extreme cases, we still think that that criminality is not mutually exclusive with the parent's responsibility and the parent's ability to take care of their children. Because they say that when they've shown that they want this active choice, when they've shown that they want to actually be in that kind of situation with their child, we firstly say that that shows that they have a vested interest in the development and the well-being of their child. But at worst situation, we've shown that they are put in maximum security and are in a safe environment. Their entire case is rested on this mischaracterization of the environment that the children are going to be in. But more importantly, they told us that, well, if they're in prisons, it means that these parents are bad role models. We say that firstly, their alternatives, such as transferring custody and being taken care of by social workers, are even worse. We say that when you transfer custody, when you're looking at a child that has grown up in a very vulnerable situation, that has lost a lot of stability that a two-parent family can provide them, when you have this kind of transfer of custody that firstly takes a long time, we say that that kind of environment actually provides even more instability towards the child's development of their identity. We say that that in itself is also very bad. that. But when you take a look at the other alternative of giving them under the care of foster homes or social workers, we say that the empirical evidence has shown us that children that go in those kinds of environment continue and to exacerbate that kind of identity crisis because of the fact that they've been deprived from their original blood parents. But moreover, we say, and they haven't really responded to us, about how this kind of identity crisis is really crucial. Because a large part of our case was talking about the development of a child when they are in that kind of unique situation where they're in a single parent family and their parent has committed a crime. That kind of vulnerability means that they're so much more susceptible to these kinds of gangs that are poaching on these kinds of children. And we think that they have to be able to respond to this substantial harm because of the fact that there's this bitterness and resentment against the society for depriving them from this crucial bond with their parent. But before I move, and now that I've shown you how in all these situations, the objections to why this will be bad to the children doesn't stand, and move on to my substantive. Yes, sir.
Madam, individuals like Steve Jobs have come out of foster homes. Don't insult all foster parents around the world by telling them they are worse parents than people in jail for serious crimes.
Yes, sir. We're not generalizing that all people who grow up in foster homes and in these kinds of social workers are going to be bad. But we're saying that you're taking a look at the unique situation of these children when they are in that vulnerable situation, when they are in that identity crisis of firstly being in a single parent family and secondly their parent going to be in prisons, depriving them of that kind of ability to form a development and a formation of the bond with their parent. So now let's take a look at my first idea of how it actually aids rehabilitation of parents. Because we think that the role of justice isn't just about punishment, it isn't just about retribution. It's also about rehabilitation of individuals back into society, which we think in the large majority of cases that we're focusing our case on actually happens. We see that when parents show an intent and have chosen to once again undertake the responsibility of taking care of the child, we also think that in the long term it's better for the parents' rehabilitation. Because we think that a crucial part of this intent of justice is for the individual to regain and redevelop this sense of responsibility. Now we say that you can't simply divorce this, the role of an individual as an individual citizen towards a state from the role as a parent. We think that when they're put in that situation, where they're actively involved in every step of the child's development, they show an increasing transformation in character because they're in that situation where they develop a stronger bond with their child, where they're actively involved in the child's growth. And we think that that, in many cases, actively helps to transform a person's character and to regain that sense of responsibility towards their child because of the stronger bond that is formed. And we think that in the long run, it's a better situation than if this parent is isolated from its child and loses this kind of sense of responsibility towards its child. So in general, ladies and gentlemen, what we have been telling you today on Team Hong Kong is the state doesn't have the right to take away all of an individual's rights, especially when this individual has other roles that grant it interactive rights. So the right of a parent actually interacts with the right of the child. We've been able to show you that for the child's case, we think that it's better because you don't have that situation where they continue on exacerbated in that loss of identity, but we also show that in the long run, it's also better for the rehabilitation of the parent. And because of these reasons, we think that at the end of the day, both the principles and the practicals still stand on Team Hong Kong. Thank you.